everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we're really excited today. We get to talk with another writer. We love talking with writers. And today we have Karen Witemeyer here with us, who is the new book, The Fairest Heart. And Karen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So what we like to do with new guests is we like to get to know a little bit about you. And so why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit how you got started writing?
Absolutely. So my journey to writing is maybe a little bit different than a lot of authors. I wasn't one of those kids that was always writing and scribbling stories and that kind of thing. I just was a reader. I loved reading, and I would come home from the library with big stacks of books, and I would daydream. That's probably as close as I came to writing my own stories, as I would daydream. But I always thought, as I got older and teachers and so forth in high school and college would say, hey, you're a good writer. It started planting seeds that maybe someday I might try my hand at writing, but it was always sometime way in the future. And then I was a stay-at-home mom. I had a master's degree. I graduated from college, married, had 3 kids, all pre-K age down to like less than 1. And my husband found out that he was losing his job. And I had this moment of panic of, oh my goodness, I need to do something to help contribute to the family income. But at the same time, I still wanted to be with my kids, and how do I do that? And so, brilliant idea, I'll write a book and that will solve everything. Very naive. It took me 6 years before I signed my first book deal, but that was kind of a little kick in the pants that I got to say, hey, now is the time. Quit putting it off. Start to get serious about it. And so I did. I joined a local writers group. I started learning everything I could about the craft. I started attending conferences, that kind of thing. And when the time was right, God opened the right door, and I was able to sign a contract with Bethany House, which was my dream publisher, and never looked back. It's been wonderful.
That's so great. I love that. So did you always had an interest in romance in particular?
Yes, I'm a sap. I just, that's from the time I was little, I enjoyed those, any kind of story that had a romance element to it. And I loved historical. So I grew up with Little House on the Prairie. And of course, I loved when Laura got old enough that she got married.
Yeah.
Anna Green Gables,
Yeah.
loved that series. Those were the classics that I grew up with. And as I got older, I started getting into other romance stories, but it was always historical. I think there's something about the historical that just feels more fairy tale-esque to me. I don't know if it's the big dresses or what it is, but something about escaping into a completely different time just, to me, enhances the romance. And so, yes, I'm a big sap, and I've always loved that.
Yeah, I always have too. The first like big book that I ever read that I was like proud of that I read was Little Women.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So there's something about that like independent spirit of Jo that's very appealing, especially when you're young.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. So so you took 6 years. How did you end up getting that first contract? I always think that would be the hardest part.
It is. It's really hard. And the market is so competitive and all of that. Well, I had started going to the American Christian Fiction Writers National Conference. I think back in like 2005 was the first one that I went to. And in 2008, I finally had my first completed novel. I had published a few shorter pieces in magazines and things like that, but I hadn't done a full novel yet. Well, in 2008, I think it's actually 2007. The conference was going to be in Dallas, which is only, about 3-hour drive from where I live in Abilene. And so I was really excited to have my first manuscript. I decided I would volunteer to, do whatever pre-conference stuff I could help with since I lived close. So I went early. I was assigned to stuff envelopes, for the pre-conference stuff. And there were a couple other people in the room with me who were stuffing envelopes. There was a lady working at the same table, had no idea who she was. And I started listening. I'm kind of introverted, so I'm not really good at making conversation all by myself, but I started listening to what other people in the room were saying. And I figured out her name, this lady at the table, was also named Karen. My name is Karen. Okay, that's kind of fun. Then
No
I
way.
finally pieced together this was Karen Schur from Bethany
Okay.
House. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, okay, what's the etiquette? I know you're not supposed to pitch in the bathroom. Are you allowed to pitch at the, And so I was too scared to say anything. So I didn't say anything. I just kind of made the connection. Hey, we both have the same name. That's kind of fun. And then later at the conference, I sat at her lunch table, and she was super sweet and let each of us at the table, give a, 30-second pitch of our book. And so, I pitched my book at the time, and she nodded and looked interested and all that, but I was too scared to ask anything after that. Well, there was one other lady at the table who, bless her heart, she was brave and she just put it out there. Can we send you our proposals? And I thank God for that woman, because I don't know what would have happened without her. Karen Schur was very gracious and said, yes, go ahead. And so you got to believe, as soon as I got home, I sent off that proposal. And so, publishing works really slow. But after a while, she responded back and said, hey, I'm interested. Will you send me the full manuscript? And I was like, God opened this door. This is fabulous. I'm so excited. Then came the rejection. And I was like, oh, but it was probably the best rejection you could get, because she said, we really like your writing, but this particular story is too similar to something that we've published recently. But we're really interested in the dress shop that you have in this book. Can you make us a new story about a dress shop? Well, in the original manuscript, the dress shop burned to the ground on page 4. So it's not like I could just tweak the story. I had to start from scratch and start all over. But I had my foot in the door. I was going to do whatever they asked me to do. And so I said, well, yes, I will absolutely do that. In the meantime, I'm about 2/3 of the way done with the book that was supposed to be the sequel to that book that they just rejected. And I said, can I finish this book? Let me tell you a little bit about it. And they're like, oh yeah, when you get it finished, send it to us and let us know. Because it was enough of a standalone that it could, work on its own. And so, the rest of the year passes by. It's almost time for a conference again in 2008. And, I finally finished that other manuscript, and I'm sure they've completely forgotten who I am, but I break out the email. I send them an email, say, hey, you probably don't remember me, but here's my story. Here's what we talked about. They're like, oh yeah, we remember you. Send the whole manuscript. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And so I sent the book, and they're like, hey, we really like this, but what about that dress shop book we talked about? And I was like, I will put something together for you with that dress shop book. And so by the time conference got there, I think I had one chapter written of the dress shop book. And I got to meet with them in person at that conference, and they started talking about signing me to a 3-book deal, but they wanted to launch with that dress shop book that I had not written yet. But I was so excited. And of course I, was just, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And so what we ended up doing was they signed me to a 3-book deal in January. That was in September that the conference was. They signed me to a 3-book deal in January. My first book didn't release until 2010. And that's because they wanted to wait until A Tailor-Made Bride, which was my debut novel with the dress shop, became my first book. And then the book that I had written actually before that ended up releasing. So that Tailor-Made Bride came out in June, and then Head in the Clouds came out in October, I think, of that same year. And so it was kind of fun to be able to have 2 books released fairly close together, because I had written them out of order, but so it all worked out. And it was just one of those things where, just God was working behind the scenes. So yeah.
That's an amazing story that they noticed something in that dress shop. And you said it was just like in the first 4 pages.
I don't know. Yeah.
That's incredible. And they were determined to get that dress shop book
They
from you.
were.
That's funny.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
Consider yourself a pantser or plotter?
I'm kind of a combo. I'm probably closer to a plotter than a pantser, but my editors like me to send a detailed synopsis before I start writing anyway, because they want to, help me work through any trouble areas or all that. So I like to have a firm idea in my head of who the characters are, what the main plot is that's driving the book. What are the big pillars of, this is a big conflict and this is a big conflict, that kind of thing. I like to have those big pieces figured out ahead of time, but then I just sit down and write. So I don't do like chapter by chapter outlines or anything like that. I just need to know the basic story elements, and then I just kind of pants it from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could picture that would be sort of more my style, like have a basic framework. I think you almost need to like you said, to pitch it, you need it, but also just to kind of get you some idea of kind of what you're going for and what you're writing about. I would think you need some kind of plot.
It is nice to have a general roadmap so you don't end up going way off into left field and have no idea how to bring it back. So some writers really get excited by that, and that really spawns their creativity. It's like, I like to be surprised, and I like a little bit of surprise, but I don't want to be like, I'm way off here in left field and I don't know where I'm going. So
I did not see that character going that way.
Right.
I used to do NaNoWriMo every year. Now I'm so busy because it's, we cover Christmas movies on the podcast. So November is just like insane for me.
Sure.
So I can't really do it anymore. But that process of just kind of everyday writing something and seeing where it takes you is pretty exciting.
It is.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. So writing historical novels, how is it doing all of that research and getting those details and things like that?
So research is a big part of what I do. And I do quite a bit at the beginning to make sure I know my setting really well. I know who my characters are, maybe their occupation. I have to research their occupation. I've done enough books that are set in similar time periods. So most of my books are set 1880s to 1890s. And so because so many of them are set in that same time period, I kind of already have a basic understanding of, what was invented then and what was available and, that kind of thing. And so that helps a lot, so I don't have to re-research that with every book. But I need to do all the detail work for this particular setting, this particular occupation. How are they going to communicate? How are they going to travel? How are they, all of that stuff I have to figure out. And so I do a lot of it at the beginning when I'm kind of plotting the story. And then a lot of it is just as I'm writing, I'm like, ooh, I better look that up. And then I, spend some time going down a rabbit trail and finding the answer to my question. Every once in a while, I'll have a story that is really centered on a particular event in history. I don't do a lot of deep historical writing, but I do have several books that have been precipitated by a specific historic event. And so when that happens, I make sure that I do as much research as I can to get the details right, because I want it to reflect accurately what was historically happening during that time and how people were reacting to it and the impact that it had on communities and, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So what is it that particularly draws you to that sort of Victorian era time period?
So I grew up in California, moved to Texas to go to school, married a guy from Texas. I live in Texas now. So I really kind of like researching Texas, and it's such a big state, and there's so many different types of topography, and it can be very different depending on where I set the story. But because I didn't grow up knowing Texas history, it's been kind of fun for me to do a lot of that research, to know what was really going on in Texas during different eras of history. And I think one of the reasons why I've opted to go late 1800s is early pioneer times, it was very difficult, and there wasn't a lot of people in Texas. I mean, there were a lot of, people who were native to Mexico or were native, and Comanche and, all that kind of stuff. But for the people that I feel most comfortable writing from their point of view, there really weren't that many that were here. And then there was so much politically happening. And I kind of like to stay away from a lot of the big political. I want it to just be what's going on in the everyday person's life. That's kind of the thing that I find attractive, that I want to write about. And so once you get past the Civil War and Reconstruction and all of the Indian wars and all that kind of thing, then it's more kind of a small town Americana feel. And for me, that was just kind of what fit my personality best and what I found most interesting. And to be honest, it was a lot easier to research what was going on in that time period because we had a lot more that was available. And so that was kind of the sweet spot for me. The railroad was making all kinds of progress. It came through Texas, starting in the eastern edge of Texas in the 40s, but it really started conquering Texas in the 80s. And that's when it started having all these small towns that were popping up everywhere. And so that was kind of my sweet spot, what drew me, because it was kind of the era that was the most interesting to me, and it was easier to research, and it was fun just seeing Texas kind of sprout out of this very, only people were living in the eastern part, and now people are spreading out all across western Texas and all of that too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you have in your research times when you get really surprised, you learn something new that you didn't know about Texas, or just about the characters or what was happening?
Yes, a lot of times. And it's always fun to learn some new tidbit. And I always try to find a way to work it into the book in a way that's organic and makes sense, all of that. But sometimes it's just, oh, that's just too fun. I have to work that in. Sometimes when I am researching a particular area, I'm fortunate enough to find community histories, so that, in local libraries or that kind of thing. And I love finding tidbits about actual people that lived there in that time period and being able to give them little cameos in my book, just things like that are just kind of fun. And I like to honor their actual real history within the fictional setting that I've got.
Yeah.
From the author of the Friendships and Festival series comes a story of what's next, second chances, and making life and hockey better for ourselves and others. But a Mitzvah Mistake kicks off Stacey Agdern's Last Girl Standing series and is available on June 1st from Thule Publishing and everywhere books are sold. For more about Stacey, go to her website, staceyagdern.com.
Fairest Heart is coming out, and why don't you tell people listening a little bit about what the book is about?
So Fairest of Heart is my first book in a new series called Texas Ever After. And as the name implies, it's going to be a series of Western spins on classic fairy tales. And of course, as a kid, I grew up in the Disney era. I loved all those classic stories. And so it's been really fun for me to kind of reimagine them in a new way. There have been lots of fairy tale retellings that have been done in medieval settings or fantasy settings or contemporary settings, but not really too much that I was able to find that were done in kind of an American West setting. And so it's been a lot of fun. And Fairest of Heart, as you might be able to guess from the title, is a retelling of Snow White. And so we have our heroine who's, been demoted into a servant kind of position, but she still has a very pure heart. And then you have the brooding Texas Ranger hero. You have the vain, mirror-loving villainess who, has all kinds of despicable schemes going on in the book. And I think one of my favorite elements is the 7 retired drovers, these old cowboys that live on the Diamond D Ranch. And so, of course, they adopt Penelope Snow into their little family there. I had a lot of fun with those characters.
It was really clever. Because it wasn't like an outright, it's not like you were parodying Snow White, or it was just sort of like, it was subtle, I think the influence. And I thought it had a kind of a sass to it, a little bit of a spice, but not in the sense of like erotic or anything like that. It's not at all. It's clean romance. But just, I don't know. I just felt like particularly her interactions with the troop, the scenes between Titus and Penelope, like, were just pretty sassy.
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
I like feisty heroines.
Yeah,
I
feisty,
like,
that's a good word.
yeah. I
Yeah.
like it when she's willing to stand up for herself and do what's right, even when, the world around her is pressuring her to do, something else. And it was really kind of fun to juxtapose Narcissa, who was the
Yeah.
villainess, with Penelope, because they're both gorgeous women, right? They're both beautiful women. Narcissa has learned from her experience to use her beauty as a weapon, right? And so she uses it to manipulate men to get what she wants, that kind of thing. Whereas Penelope sees her beauty as something that's almost a curse, because it has gotten her into trouble that wasn't of her own making. And so she tries to hide her beauty as much as possible. But then, of course, it's that inner beauty of hers that really shines through. And so the message of the story is really more about how important inner beauty is, as opposed to the outer beauty that can be corrupted or fades over time, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Narcissa was a great character. She is very dubious, very, very, like, she does not care who she takes down
I
to
have
get
to
what she
admit,
wants.
it's a little bit, I don't know what it says about me, but I have a lot of fun writing villain point of view.
Yeah, I was going to ask
It's like
about that.
I have free reign to be as snarky and as ugly as I want. So I don't know why that's so much fun for me.
Yeah.
But it is kind of fun to be able to get into that point of view. But I like also getting the chance to bring the villain down and say, hey, that's really not what life is all about. So
Yeah, she was pretty ruthless. It was fun. Like, you don't expect that from this kind of story. Like, usually things are just so sweet, and so, it's kind of like, the thing about watching, like, When Calls the Heart, is that everybody's just so nice and sweet, and that's the whole appeal of the show, and I understand that. But it's nice too sometimes when you get a little bit of camp, a little bit of yeah. So that must have been, I that was one of my questions. Was it fun to write Narcissa?
It really was.
Yeah.
I enjoyed just getting to step into a person who is so different from me, and just, having free reign to be as snarky and sarcastic as I want, and, just let her really,
Yeah.
but I wanted her to be real too. So it wasn't like she was just evil for the sake of being evil. She had grown up with this, the only way that she could make her own way was to use her beauty to manipulate men in order to get what she wanted. And of course that twisted into, well, I deserve XYZ, and and so I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah.
And so but yeah, it was fun to write from that point of view, but I have to be careful not to live there too long.
Yeah. Well, so aside from the Snow White connection, like, how did you come up with Titus and Penelope as characters, and their names, what they look like, all that? How did you kind of come up with that?
So I have a Facebook group called The Posse. They're kind of a group of my fans, and they are really good to help me design my characters as far as like physical appearance goes, and I get them to vote on what names they like best and that kind of thing. And so it was really fun. I wanted to pay homage to the classic Snow White, so I really wanted a heroine who had that pale complexion, dark hair, that kind of thing, very beautiful figure, all of that. And with Titus, I had had characters before that were either lawmen or were, vigilantes for good, kind of thing. But I'd never done a Texas Ranger. And so I was like, I need to do a Texas Ranger hero one of these days. And so that was really fun to be able to do that. I had visited the Texas Ranger Museum in Waco a few years ago, and I had stored away little tidbits, that I found really interesting when I was there. And I was like, now's the chance that I can use all of that fascinating stuff I found at that museum. And so that was fun to kind of be able to use that, even though it was several years ago, use those things that I had tucked away in the memory banks from that and be able to bring that to life for his character. And in the classic Snow White, the 7 dwarves were miners, right? And they had all these jewels and stuff. And so I wanted to find a way to, how can I bring the jewel element kind of into the story? And so that became the mystery of, there's these missing jewels, where are they from, who stole them, that kind of thing. And so being able to kind of bring that element in as well.
Yeah, that was really clever with the whole with corsets and the there's things that kept you guessing.
Yeah,
that was clever.
It was fun for me to try to figure out, well, how in the world is she going to hide this stuff? And
Yeah.
somehow Penelope ends up with it. So we have to get a little bit creative here.
Yeah. So do you find it at all challenging to build the romantic tension while keeping it clean romance and keeping it everything above board, I guess?
Yeah. Well, in my life, obviously, I mean, I'm married. I lived through romance. I still have romance in my there.
Yeah.
Romance is not just what happens in the bedroom, right? To me, the vast majority of romance is what happens in the closeness that you build with somebody, in that companionship, in the physical attraction, and just the things you learn to admire about somebody. That's what builds a foundation for real lasting love, right? Not just, oh, they're so hot and I want to, that they're okay, but that's not what is really a strong foundation for what's going to build love that's going to last for 50 years. And so when I tell my romantic stories, that's what I want to put the emphasis on. Yes, there's physical attraction. Yes, there's mutual admiration and that kind of thing. That's normal. Everybody experiences that. But there's also that element of, what is it about their actual personhood, not just what they look like on the outside, that draws me in and wants me to spend time with that person? I want to be with them because we share these interests, or we share these values, or I really admire their courage, or I admire the way that she can always just smooth out a conversation and nobody has hurt feelings. Being able to build off of each other's strengths so you complement each other. How can we put together 2 people that realistically you can imagine them living happily ever after for 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you really can build the chemistry more authentically and slowly, and really, because it's like in the steamier books, sometimes it's like, well, it's done now. Like, and as opposed to, oh, I keep waiting and it keeps building and I keep building and I'm getting more and more like, come on.
Right.
Yeah, I think that works really good. Yeah. So are all of your books then set in Texas, or have you
Yep, all of my books are set in Texas, which kind of has become part of my brand.
Yeah.
And of course they're in different locations in Texas, so I'm trying to spread it out across the whole wide area here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that not all of my heroes are technically cowboys. I have some that have different occupations. I have one in part on the line. I had my nerdiest hero. He rode a bicycle instead of a horse, and he wore glasses, and he was a telegraph operator. And he was kind of an homage to my husband, who is a computer nerd. And so I was like, I need a tech hero from the 1800s. What would that be? But I had a lot of people really resonated with him just because he was so different from the typical alpha male cowboy. He was still a Western Texas hero, but he was different, and he used his own strengths and abilities to help rescue the heroine and all of that. So it's fun to kind of play with it. They're not all cowboys, but they're all swoony Texas heroes.
So what does your family think of these books? They read it and they're like, oh.
So I tease my husband because he's never actually read any of my books.
No.
But he is so supportive. He has like a whole bookshelf in his office where all my books are, and people come by and they ask him about them, and he's excited to tell people about my books and all of that. So he is super supportive. But yeah, he's not a big reader of romance. He's a Star Wars guy, so he reads all Star Wars and James Bond. That's what he's interested in.
Star Wars is a space Western.
It is. Yes, absolutely. My daughter, she's college age. She's working on a PhD at A&M, And
Oh,
she
wow.
has read all of my books. She's one of my biggest fans. And of course, my mother-in-law, my mom, they read my books. So this book, Fairest of Heart, is actually dedicated to my son and his new wife. They just celebrated their first wedding anniversary,
Aw.
and she is a huge Disney fan. They did their honeymoon at Disney World, and she loves all of the Disney movies and all of that. So when I first knew that I was going to do a fairy tale retelling, I'm like, okay, that first book needs to be dedicated to Wyatt and McKenna, because they're, the fairy tale love story living
Yeah.
out right there. And it just, the release of it was just perfect, because I got my author copies like probably about 3 days before their first anniversary. So that was really kind of cool to be able to honor them in that way.
That's really cute. So when you're writing, do you think about who you would cast in movie versions of your books? Do you have like the picture of like, oh, it'd be Brad Pitt as Titus or something like that?
Not really. They kind of just live in my imagination. And in fact,
Uh-huh.
when I was first writing, I didn't like go and pull pictures off the internet or anything. They just lived in my head, and I described them how I saw. Now that I have my posse group, I have them help me find, characters. And some of them are movie actors, some of them are just models, some of them are random people that, hey, I found this person. I have no idea who she is, but I think she fits what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that is actually kind of helpful to have them help me do that, because especially when it comes time to design the cover and things like that, my publisher is always asking, hey, what are you picturing for these people? And be able to have those images ready to hand over is very
Uh-huh.
helpful. I
Oh,
have
that's
had several heroes who looked suspiciously like Hugh Jackman,
ah,
so I'm not
okay,
sure
good.
where that came from, but
Yeah. Big Greatest Showman fan there, are you? Yeah. So do you have an idea of which fairy tale you're going? I mean, you're probably right. You probably got it done. You're doing next.
So the next one is going to be it's the first draft is already done. I'm in the middle of doing rewrites now. It will be a Cinderella
Ah,
retelling. So there'll be a
yes.
gender swap. He leaves a boot, and so it's going to be
Ah,
If the Boot Fits will be the name of the story, which makes me think of Woody from Toy Story. So I'm really happy about that title. But it's going to be a little more of a twist on the original story. So one of the things that I really wanted to do with these retellings is I wanted to redeem the stepmother. In classic fairy tales, the stepmother is always evil, and I'm like, there are some really wonderful stepmothers
it's
out
really
there who,
true. I mean, as,
who make
as,
such a wonderful difference in the lives of these kids.
aside
And
from Maria von Trapp, that's like the only nice stepmother.
I know. So the stepmother is, of course, since we did a gender swap, it's his stepmother, and he has step brothers instead of stepsisters that are in the story. But she is really a force for good in the story instead of being the villain. So, and I won't give anything away about who the villain is, because since I rewrote that, it's going to be a surprise, hopefully,
Yeah,
as you read the story.
I'm
But
intrigued
yeah, I had a
because
lot of fun with that one, just kind of giving it a different twist.
yeah, I'm intrigued because how do you make him the servant? Cinderella. I mean, Cinderfella. I love that, by the way. I'm like, without the stepmother being bad, making
Right.
him work,
So it's more a poverty thing than a servant thing in
Oh,
this
okay.
story. So she is the cattle baron's daughter. So she comes from the very wealthy. He owns a lot of
Clever.
property, all that kind of stuff. And the hero is kind of the poor cowhand who is doing anything he can to try to support his stepmother and brothers who his dad has passed on, and so he's the oldest. He feels responsible to take care of them, that kind of thing. And so it's more of a poverty and rags to riches kind of story than more than a I've been oppressed and that kind of thing.
Okay. Very interesting. Well, I'll be very excited for that.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies.
Yeah. So the Fairest of Heart, what is your favorite part? What do you think people are going to love the most about it?
I think the thing I had the most fun with, and I think I like interspersing humor in my stories as well. And I think the thing I had the most fun with were the seven
Yeah.
grandpas in the story.
They were fun. They were great.
They each had distinct personalities. They bantered really well with each other. They gave each other a hard time, but yet they were very supportive of one another. And you knew they were family, right? Nothing was going to break those bonds. And so just having the fun to let them josh with each other and give each other a hard time, and yet still support each other and know that, hey, Penelope is now part of the family. It's like they will do whatever it takes to make sure that she's taken care of. And so having that, I think as I look at all the books that I've written, family really seems to be a huge overall theme for a lot of my stories. And a lot of it is not just birth family. It's, characters have been adopted or they've come together, and it's more about the family that you form around you than necessarily your biological family. And so it can be the friendships and the adoptions and all of that, and how you find your belonging, how you find your tribe that you really find that support and love and belonging with.
Yeah. Well, very good. I really enjoyed the book, and I'm excited to see what you do in the future. People should definitely check it out. So we like to end the interview with some fun get to know you questions. So
Great.
First one is, what's the best ice cream flavor?
Oh, I love ice cream, and asking for the one flavor is going to be hard. My classic is chocolate chip, but I have to say Bluebell, and Bluebell is a Texas thing, but Bluebell recently came out with a new flavor that may have to be my new favorite. It's a chocolate ice cream with peanut butter cups and peanut butter cookie dough in it.
Oh, wow.
And it's amazing.
That sounds really good. Yeah. Okay, good. What is your favorite color?
Purple.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So I work
right.
at ACU, and purple is our color. And my kids grew up, they went to ACU also, but they also grew up in their school was Wiley, and they were also purple. So I think all of us own like more purple clothes than anybody should. But
that's so good. My high school, the colors were orange and black, which is things like the weirdest colors.
Like Halloween.
Yeah, like Halloween all year round. But then my college was blue and white, I guess. But yeah. So that's more respectable. So what music are you into right now?
I am a child of the 80s. So I love 60s, 70s, 80s. I love all those oldies. But I also love contemporary Christian and that too. So, but yeah, I'm really a child of the 80s at heart.
Yeah, very good. All right. What is your go-to date night food?
Oh, date night. Let's see. Well, my favorite place probably for my husband to take me out to dinner is Red Lobster. I love their biscuits.
I was just going to say cheddar biscuits. Yeah, those are pretty good. All right. What is your go-to date night activity if you're going out and doing something?
Probably going to see a movie. I mean, that sounds very cliche, but we don't go out to see movies very often. And so to go out and have dinner in a movie is a really special treat for us. So we enjoy doing that.
Yeah. We've said on this podcast, though, for a long time that the key is actually to do the movie first and then do dinner / whatever you're going to do. Because then you can talk about the movie.
That's a smart idea. Yeah. And if you go early enough, you don't have to pay as high of a price.
Yeah,
which
that's
I
right.
am a person who likes a price discount. So
yeah, matinee. That's right. Okay. Which do you like better, dogs or cats?
Dogs. I don't have either, but I like dogs better.
Okay. Yeah. cats, you have to earn their love. They're a little standoffish, most cats at first. All right. Which you like better, beaches or mountains?
Mountains, definitely. I actually grew up along the beach and I never really liked it all that much, but I love the mountains, love hiking, love just the scenery, the big trees, and yeah.
All right. Which is your favorite holiday to celebrate?
Christmas, just because all the family comes together and it's just, I also have the most time off from work, so that's nice. But yeah, just having all the family together.
Yeah, it's hard to beat Christmas because it's like a whole season, whereas the others are just one day.
So true.
Especially if you're in Hallmark world.
Oh, I'm sure it probably goes a couple months there.
Oh yeah. They start the first Hallmark Christmas movie, I think last year aired on October 20th.
Oh, wow. Hadn't even gotten through Halloween yet. Yeah.
Yeah. They even had a whole ad campaign showing the trick-or-treaters knock, 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 and open up it's Christmas.
That's funny.
Yeah. All right. Last question. What is your favorite Hallmark or romantic movie?
Okay. I think this is Spirit of Christmas a Hallmark movie?
It's I think one of the other brands, but yeah, it's
Okay.
basically a Hallmark movie. Yeah.
I really liked that one.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think.
Jen Lilly, right? Isn't that one? But the ghosts.
Yes.
Yeah. That was a good one.
I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
I saw oh goodness. I should have anticipated that question and gone back and reviewed that. I think the one I've seen most recently, there was one with a hockey player and a bookstore, a girl that either owned or worked in a bookstore.
Was that with Rachel Lee Cook?
I think so.
Frozen in Love, I think. Now Mater.
I think maybe that one.
Yeah. That one's a good one. Yeah. I like that one too. Yeah. Well, very good.
I don't have as much time to watch as many as I would like.
Yeah, I understand that. That's the thing. There's just so much content. People are like, I swear a day doesn't go by where somebody doesn't say, you've got to watch this particular television show. Cause I'm just like, I have to watch all these Hallmark movies. I don't have time to watch these shows that I'm sure they are great. I'm sure it's amazing. I haven't even watched the latest season of Ted Lasso. I've just been too busy. And now I've heard it's not very good. So well,
so maybe it was okay.
Yeah, good choice. So very good. You did it. You answered all the questions. And so tell people when the book comes out and everything, how they can follow you on social media, all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. Fairest of Heart officially releases on June 6th. So it's coming up pretty quick. And it'll be available everywhere that books are sold. And finding me online, if you just want to learn more about me and my books, my website's probably the best place to go, KarenWitemeyer.com. And then if you want to connect with me, the Posse that I mentioned earlier is a Facebook group. Just search for the Posse. And I'm there 5 days a week, chatting and having fun with all of my readers. And so that's the best place to connect with me on the social media area. So,
and we'll have all of that in the description so people should check it out. And thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you. It's been really fun.
We'd like to thank Karen for coming on the podcast. This was really fun, and I did sincerely enjoy the book. It was very clever. So please check it out. Check our affiliate link in the description. We would really appreciate that. And you can follow us on social media at Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast. You can follow me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really, really helps us a lot. And if you were listening and watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have the patron group, which is so much fun, and the merch store. Check that out. And thanks so much again to Karen. We'll talk to you later. Bye.